Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the few, for staying with us, and my colleague Luqman Shadrack for taking you through that first part of the show. It's all systems go for the start of the voter registration weekend that will be occurring over the 4th and the 5th of February. And of course, this is an important milestone, 30 years of democracy, and this allows the citizens of South Africa to go ahead and put their mark ahead of the general elections through the registration. Now, there is a push for Muslims within South Africa to go ahead and register to vote, as this will be the final weekend they can do it. And the South African Muslims Network has been urging all Muslims to go ahead and put their registration. I'd like to welcome the chairperson of Samnet, Dr Faisal Suleman, to discuss the importance of this year's elections and the urgency to go ahead and register. Dr Suleman, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah so much for joining us.
Well, alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Juma Mubarak for what's left of it. But yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Juma Mubarak to you also. Dr Suleman, 30 years of democracy. We understand the importance of this year's elections, given that it celebrates that 3 decades of our freedom, but emphasize more on how important this elections is really going to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's too much to celebrate. Clearly, it was better than living under apartheid. But so this year, more than ever, you're likely to see the whole ambit of coalition politics coming into play, because more likely than not, the ruling party will not get more than 50% in many of the provinces, and maybe not even nationally. And therefore, the smaller parties have the ability to become kingmakers. The best example, of course, is the mayor of Johannesburg, who is a member of Al Jamaa, that really is keeping the seat warm until the ANC and the EFF negotiate and thresh things out. But it did give Al Jamaa prominence. It gave them the opportunity to have the mayoral seat and perhaps do some good where that is possible, without being vetoed, etc., by those two major parties and the DA. But at the national level, what has transpired since the 7th of October and this moonshot pact with the DA and a whole lot of smaller parties, and the kind of money that has been poured into bringing the DA into power, the dynamic of South Africa going to the International Court of Justice and the repercussions for South Africa, punishment, in fact, we should say, that are probably being planned economically, politically, etc., in Israel, in London, Tel Aviv, in probably Paris and Washington as well, means that one, we need to keep this sort of Zionist coalition out of power, because it has dire consequences for Muslims in particular, but for the country as a whole, this unbridled neoliberal capitalism that would see us becoming either the 54th state of the United States, but also to get parties smaller, well, one or two. Once we're closer to the elections, we can really talk about who one should be voting for. But to give, clearly, people are highly disillusioned with the African National Congress, and for good reason. I'm talking to you now in load shedding. I'm talking really, and this is everybody's experience. Water shedding has been a huge problem in Durban and Durban North and Verulam and Stanger. So people are, to put it mildly, fed up. But at the same time, we're saying to not translate that disillusionment into not registering to vote and not voting. There's a cliche, all the politicians are the same, all are corrupt. But as Muslims, we know better. And we know that the Quran and the Sunnah tell us, if there's something wrong, try and change it. If not physically, with your mouth. If not with your mouth, at least, with your sentiment. Your vote is doing things physically, it's doing things with your mouth, and it's expressing a sense. It incorporates all three. The question is, let's put it in the right place. But being absent, what it means for us is this. If there's a 50% voter turnout, and out of that, let's say, out of that 50, the ANC gets 45 or whatever. The vote, that one person who votes for the ANC, or 30 or 35% of the total population, has decided for all of us on LGBTQ, on foreign policy, on domestic policy, on continuing the ANC on the path it has been. Clearly, we are all extremely happy with the government stance on Palestine, the ICJ, etc. But we also need to be cognizant of the country not falling apart. But you are giving 30% of the population who may have been enticed by T-shirts and hampers and whatever else, the right to choose what syllabus your child is going to learn in your Muslim school. Going to be taught, basic pornography under the guise of sex education and the transgender movement. Going to be told that mosques need to be monitored. We need to know what are all the Muslim NGOs doing, where is the fundraising coming from, etc., etc. These are not far-fetched scenarios, especially more so if the DA and its coalition get into power. But also that as a Muslim, you are derelict in your duty to try and do something for the improvement of the country. Instead of moaning and groaning on WhatsApp and WhatsApp chats, go do something. Secondly, the small parties, one may ask them, what's the point of, it's a frequent question for us. What happens, what's the point of giving your vote to a small party when they're going to give it to the ANC anyway? The difference is the leverage those small parties will get. And Al-Jamaa gave it to the ANC, but in return, they got access to the mayoral seat, access to the halls of power, and nothing stopped them from trying to do good with that access that they've got. Similarly, smaller parties, look, it'd be naive to say that the small parties will not have to negotiate, will not have to go into coalitions with one or two of the big groupings, the DA or the ANC. But you can extract some good, you can extract key positions in finance, in oversight committees, in foreign affairs, in intelligence. That, the give and take, the negotiations that will take place, and use those positions then to improve everybody in the country, to ensure there's oversight, and make sure that there are people out there in parliament and in provincial governments who are looking out for Muslims. At the moment, we've got 2 cases of 2 policemen being harassed, taken for disciplinary hearings because they have beards, neat, well-kept beards, but somewhere along the line in KwaZulu-Natal, some station commander or commissioner has decided to harass these 2. Now, we've written, for example, let me give you practical examples. Samnet has written to the Minister of Police, but you get ignored. The Department of Health has decided that they no longer want nurses to wear scarves and long sleeves while on duty working for the state. In my other hat as president of the Islamic Medical Association, we've written to the Department of Health, to the Minister of Health, etc., to no avail. Now, had we had strong enough people in Parliament who can go up to the portfolio committee, who can meet the Minister of Parliament in the corridors of Parliament and take these causes up directly, you would not have to be relying on phone calls and emails to try and get something out of them. These are 2 simple examples that I've highlighted. Like that, there are many more. Intelligence, foreign policy. Make no mistake, there'll be huge plans by the DA lot to get rid of Naledi Pandor and take over DIRCO, so they can have a pro-Israeli foreign affairs coming, in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Our presence in Parliament, our votes to ensure that that doesn't happen, that we have people who are in the portfolio committee for foreign affairs, for intelligence, for police, for communications, so that you don't have an SAPC that churns out Israeli propaganda. That's where the vote counts. Not just thinking small about, this politician is corrupt or not. We have to go beyond our little fiefdoms and think of the bigger picture that presents itself. And registering to vote over this weekend is more likely than not the last chance for physical registration. There may be, of course, online registration that will continue until there's an official announcement from the president on the actual date, probably 8th of May or whatever. But this weekend is the last chance to do it physically. And many people aren't too happy with doing things online. So our appeal is to absolutely everybody who is eligible to vote, man, woman, child, obviously over 16, to go out and register to vote. Let's have a discussion on who to vote for some other time.
Definitely. Well, we have to stop you right over there because we have to take a break. After this, I will continue my conversation with Dr. Suleman, of course, looking ahead to this week's voter registration weekend. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'm still in conversation with Dr. Faisal Suleman from Samnet. He serves as the chairperson. Dr. Suleman, we always talk about the beauty of democracy and what it gives us, especially in South Africa. And I think we all need to say, alhamdulillah, that we allowed so much of, the basic freedoms through our constitution and Bill of Rights here in South Africa. And I think that we as South Africans should reward that freedom, in a sense of going ahead and registering to vote, because there seems to be a sort of, despair attitude with regards to voting and all of that. But, again, as Muslims, we have these freedoms, we have it so much that now is the time for us to go ahead and make our mark as the Muslim minority in this country, isn't that?
Oh, absolutely. One is to say to people, huge sacrifices over decades were made, lives were lost, people were maimed, imprisoned, tortured, etc., for us to have this. But even if we don't go into that and look at it from an enlightened self-interest, one as patriots, as South African, who we are told we are here to serve humanity, in that respect alone, to do what is good for the country and not just be giving charity, but to use the talents we have, the resources, the fact that there's so much, intellectual capital within our communities, experience in law, in finance, in all of these fields, in medicine, to use some of those skills to contribute. But the other aspect is also self-interest, Muslim self-interest, to preserve the freedoms that we probably have a country that is unique in the sense that we can take the government, and it may come to that. We may end up taking the government to the fact that our nurses want to wear scarves, our men want to have beards. If we don't get joy, that is going to be the next step that Samnet looks at or the IMA looks at in terms of ensuring those rights. But we have those privileges in this country that we can take the government to court, that we can go and make a noise at the SABC about bias coverage and this and that. It doesn't exist in other countries. Our masjids are free to preach what they like. Our Darul Ulooms are not, one hopes, not having CIA listening to them or national intelligence or the security branch. But if we don't preserve it, if we don't go out there and vote and ensure that we have people representing us in parliament, at the corridors of power, those freedoms are going to be lost. Make no mistake. You cannot take this for granted. Similarly, the LGBTQ agenda is a hugely funded, just like Zionism, the Zionists will throw Zionism because of the fear of being called anti-Semitic. You see now this woke culture, with anyone who dares to speak out against transgenderism and saying, no, we don't agree that 14-year-olds must get hormones to change their sex and have body mutilation because someone had decided, they're not in the right body. We want the right to say, we don't accept this. We're not going to have it in our schools. We're not going to teach our children this. The school governing bodies, so it's not just voting. As you mentioned, it's not just the voting where democracy and the freedoms we have. It's school governing bodies. It's parent-teacher associations. All of these avenues. It's so many, the community police forum. These forums, Muslims should be everywhere, standing up for our rights, ensuring that we do what is good for humanity, and at the same time do ways related to Muslims in person or in particular, do what is in the interest of Islam and Muslims as well. And you're absolutely right, for us, if you don't take advantage of the freedoms we have and the power that it gives us, or the ability to be in the corridors where we can exert that influence, we're going to lose it. Make no mistake about it.
Dr. Suleman, one final question to end this discussion. The IEC, from your assessment, are they prepared for this year's election? Of course, this voter registration weekend is going to give us quite an idea of their preparedness heading into those polls.
In terms of registration to vote, working with Home Affairs to get the IDs all sorted out, those are always challenges, especially when it comes to the IDs. The voter registration weekends are usually not such a problem. I think the problem is going to be on the ballot paper, because there are new parties registering all the time. We have this whole, and how that is going to work. So I think that is going to present IEC with a huge challenge, and therefore they're going to have a cutoff for new parties who've registered with them, because we may end up having a ballot paper that runs into like a couple rows if there's no control of this. So I think that is probably the huge challenge. But in terms of the way they've conducted it, in the past elections over the past, 30 odd years, it has been more or less, commendable. And inshallah, we need to have a free and fair election, or the likes of Mr. Zuma and his MK party will be crying foul and trying to destabilize the country because they don't like the result. So I think that is probably a bigger question, whether some parties are prepared to accept or court rulings, accept the decisions of the electorate.
Dr. Suleman, Jazakallah so much for making the time for us. Much appreciated. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's Dr. Faisal Suleman from Samnet. He serves as their chairperson. So yes, voter registration weekend happening. Do go ahead and make your mark 3rd and 4th, of February. I said the 4th and the 5th. It's actually the 3rd and the 4th of February. So hopefully you, the South African, can go ahead, make your mark, register to vote. And of course, when the time for the polls comes, you have your ability to exercise your democratic right. After the break, I'll have your news, finance, and sports. Do stay tuned.